Who's the who's the guy who's running for Congress that you've endorsed? What's his name?
James Walkinshaw.
What's his first name?
James Walkinshaw. We should be going live. All right, we should be live in a second. All right, ready?
Okay.
3, 2. All right. We have James Walkinshaw, and could we just? All right. Hello, everyone. Sorry for all the technical issues we've just having getting this all together, but we're really looking forward to starting our virtual launch party with the Alliance for American Leadership, with the main event going on in DC. And I would just like to introduce everyone to Timothy Mahoney, who has a little bit to talk about the Alliance for American Leadership.
Good evening, everybody. First, let me thank the Alliance for American Leadership for inviting me to be part of this critical mission, bringing common sense and American values back to Washington. We are in a fight for the soul of our nation's role in the world, and the clock is ticking. Tonight, I speak to you not only as a former member of Congress from Florida, but as someone who had the honor of representing our country abroad on missions in places where diplomacy meant risking your life: Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. As someone who wore the baby blue of the Democratic Party in a ruby red district, I had to earn my credibility with both my constituents and colleagues. And I earned it in part by learning firsthand how the work of USAID saves lives, strengthens America's security, and supports our economy. One of the great philosophers of my baby boomer generation, Forrest Gump, said it best: stupid is as stupid does. And folks, right now we are watching stupid turn into a catastrophe. Let me explain. When I served on the Financial Services Committee during the 2008 banking crisis, I learned that good government is not the same as good business. Good business would have let the banks fail and retirements collapse. Good government intervened to protect families, jobs, and the stability of our institutions. So putting Elon Musk, a brilliant businessman, yes, but a governmental novice in charge of streamlining the federal government was like handing a Ferrari to a toddler and saying, go fix the freeway. His arrogance and ignorance of history and diplomacy took one of our most vital agencies and turned it into a wreckage of shuttered programs, canceled contracts, and chaos. So why does USA matter? Okay, America gets three big benefits with USAID. The first one is that gets the most attention is the humanitarian impact. So, you got to ask yourself, if not America, then who? Who else in the world can stand up to the challenges that we face as humanity faces? Programs like PEPFAR, PrEP, life-saving HIV prevention efforts are on the chopping block. Food assistance has been gutted, clinics have been closed, life-saving medications are stranded on warehouses. Diseases like HIV are rebounding, people are starving, and tonight, folks, yes, people are dying. This month, President Trump is trying to claw back $400 million in USAID funds. And unless we act, the 2026 funding fight could threaten the entire $6 billion annual budget. And the administration's so-called fix, well, let's just shutter USAID and dump the workload on the State Department. That's like trying to pound a square peg in a round hole. The State Department isn't equipped to administer complex programs that deliver tangible goods and services. Hell, they can't even manage getting people their visas and passports in a timely manner. And sadly, the experts needed to run these programs have either been fired or left the agency. The institutional knowledge has been hollowed out. The second benefit is to national security. This is the part of public rarely sees, but every general officer in our military or national security advisor understands. USAID builds more than schools and wells. It builds trust. It builds alliances like Iraq and builds alliances that save American lives by winning the hearts and minds before the bullets fly. In war zones like Iraq and Afghanistan, USAID built clean water system, power grids, and bridges while our military secured the perimeter. And I promise you this, clean water wins more wars than weapons ever will. Finally, the least talked about, but as an extremely important benefit, is the economic impact. Given the aforementioned benefits, this is perhaps Trump's most stupid move, cutting an agency that spends the majority of its dollars right here in America. 70% of USAID's budget goes to US businesses and workers, 2 billion a year to American farmers, and over 12 billion to US pharmaceutical companies. This isn't foreign charity. No, it's an engine of our US economy. So tonight, I am here to tell you that restoring USAID, restoring American values, and is a fight that we can still. What Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and their enablers in Congress did was stupid. They turned a political culture war into a global health crisis. They didn't just cut programs, they made friends into enemies. They hurt American farmers and businesses. They undermined our national security. But here's the good news, the fight isn't over. And with your voices, your votes, your values, and yes, your support, we can win it. We need to tell Congress that we're watching, we're smart, and we're working day and night to make sure that there will be consequences at the ballot box. The Alliance for American Leadership is on the front lines of this battle, and with your support, we can restore America's role as a global leader, not just in power, but in principle. I want to thank you. God bless you. God bless America, and let's get to work.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Honig. This is really great to hear about that, and just the level of issues that is facing U.S. aid and U.S. foreign aid and more broadly just seem very significant, like you were talking about with the billions and billions of dollars. But I think you're right. At the end of the day, what this comes down to is we have to put our boots on and get to work, because this is something that, as we're going to talk about, I hope comes through, that foreign aid is this long-term project that we're going to be doing for a long time, and we can't give up on those responsibilities going forwards.
Absolutely. Time is of the essence. It's not too late. We have dedicated professionals that want to provide the service. They want to do their jobs. They want to go back to work. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that Congress understands, and eventually the President of the United States, that these programs are essential. And we need to do that and take that fight to Congress immediately. Right now, this month, Donald Trump's trying to claw back $400 million of funds that we need to keep these programs going this year. In the fall, we're talking about appropriations in the 2026 budget. If we don't go and fight today, then we're going to lose that battle in the fall. And if we lose that battle in the fall, millions of people are going to die. So what we need to do is we need to pull all these people together. We need to get to work. We need to make change in Washington to protect our values and to protect, what is important to American national security and to the principles of which America is a leader of the world.
All right. Thank you very much. We really appreciated hearing from you. We're glad we were able to get you on, despite these technical difficulties. And hopefully we'll hear from more from you soon. And hopefully we'll be able to get you back on Pier going forwards and get back to getting USAID back on track.
Good night, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for supporting.
All right. Now, sorry about that, folks. Sometimes we have some of these technical issues. We're just hoping to really make the most of this stream, and I'm just going to let on Nalin Singhal, who is a member of our advisory board, who has a lot of experience dealing around issues, particularly around infrastructure and technology. He's a sort of a technical leader, and we're hoping to get on and talk a lot about the long-term impact of foreign aid, and the role of resilience and technology in foreign aid, and sort of what we give up by allowing other countries to fill the vacuum in foreign aid, if even if they can, in many cases they cannot. Hello, Nalin, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Isaac. Nice to meet you.
Oh, sorry. What is the this is the law. Anything that can go wrong can go. Anything that could go wrong can go wrong in practice.
Of course. I mean, that's what it is, right? But
That's
I'm
what it
sure
is.
the next time around, you won't have the glitches.
Yeah. Well, that's the one great thing is, as difficult as been for the entire foreign aid community, we are trying to reconstitute and put these things together. And I was just
Yeah.
hoping, your specialty actually is resilient infrastructure. So I would
Yes.
just love to have you talk about that and sort of, I guess, just thinking about, USAID, like uh, Timothy said, is not just food and water, but it's also building that infrastructure. And I was just wondering if you could talk about that and sort of the role of resilient infrastructure and how that contributes to American security and prosperity for other countries.
Sure. Um, Glad to be here. I did catch the last half of Timothy's questions. I'll echo a lot of what he's saying, but maybe put a slightly different spin on it too. So, as you just said that, a lot of people, when they think of foreign aid, they think of, like food drops and vaccines. And, that's really important and it matters. But that's not all that, what foreign assistance means. The US has, spent decades building things also. To, put it into context, we spent like more than $4 billion just in Afghanistan to build roads, schools, and power infrastructure. We have built like power grids across West Africa. We spent more than $100 million working on the water system on the Mekong River Delta in Vietnam. And that's real infrastructure. That's the thing that actually creates stability in the population and the society where they are being built. But here's the thing, you know, we are in the US and we sometimes don't realize this, but when those systems break, like, the power is out for half the day, unpredictably even, or the water is dirty, or there is no internet. And I mean, what do people do without internet in a lot of cases, right? All of that, it creates pressure. And what
Yeah.
happens then? You know, People make changes. Sometimes they migrate, sometimes things turn even worse. You turn things into like desperation, it becomes unrest, and sometimes extremist groups will fill in that power vacuum. But sitting in the US, you sometimes feel that how does it affect us? It doesn't affect us. It's like way over there, like somewhere in a far off country. A lot of times I haven't even heard of the country because it's such a small nation. But it does actually affect us because our supply chains are so intertwined. We might get like refugee waves, or in the worst case, we sometimes have to send troops there to actually stabilize that nation later on. And all of that, ends up meaning that we are paying for all of this later on. But here's the thing, if we invest in resilience and infrastructure early on, it becomes like a firewall that keeps things from falling apart. And that's how we should lead with example but not with force. And we have done this in the past, like if you go back 50 years, 60 years now, right after World War II, the US helped a lot in rebuilding Europe. And part of it was help our allies, but part of it was also to prevent spread of communism and everything from the Soviet Union. And but that is a big example, in how we build a world that is more aligned with our values, our democratic systems. Because the thing is that if we don't do that, it's not like problems are going to go away, right? There are
Yeah.
other countries in the world, for example, China, and it's already stepping in to fill in gaps that the US is leaving. Take the Belt and Road Initiative, right? They have about 140 countries already signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative. And what this is actually building influence through infrastructure. But they do it, in a very different way than the US does. Um, it actually creates debt traps for a lot of these countries. I don't know if you know this, but uh, for example, in Sri Lanka, they built out a port which wasn't really needed by the country, but it was built out, and then the country fell into a debt trap. And what ended up happening is that they had to like offer it up to China for 99 years for free exclusive use. And that's not just in Sri Lanka, right? They are doing it in a lot of countries like Pakistan or Kenya or Laos. So the thing that we have to take away from this is, that we need to show up, because if we don't show up, there are other powers in the world ready to fill in the gap.
Yeah, and there's just two things you sort of touched on, talking about the other powers filling in the gap and also sort of opportunities lost. And I just wonder if you could touch
Yeah.
on very briefly, sort of, I guess, how this affects the sort of unfolding emerging technological sphere. Because I know you've talked a lot about AI and dealing with disasters and building resilient infrastructure. Can you just talk about sort of what the consequences of are in this current moment?
So think about, how we have dealt with foreign aid in the past. A lot of times when we measure success about aid, it's how much did we spend and what did we deliver. It's like, did I spend $1 million, just a number I'm making up, and, build 10 schools or deliver 10,000 vaccines, that kind of thing. Because it's super easy to count, but it doesn't, always answer the question that did we spend the money in the smartest way possible. But the problem is that in aid organizations, a lot of times the admin budget is cut so thin to actually maximize delivery of resources that you don't even have the bandwidth to ask that question. But this is where, tech comes in. There's now, we have tools like AI models and remote sensing and satellite data that can help you predict impact with a much lower administrative footprint. And they can help you monitor things like flood zones and grid health without actually sending out teams into the field. And that kind of cuts down on human resources that you have to actually use to do this. You actually see this right now in US utilities. The US utilities, they're not just reacting to outages and saying that, hey, this thing went down, let's go and fix this. They're actually starting to ask questions that if the substation fails, what else will break? Who gets cut off? And how do we prevent this before that happens? And that is the key here for building infra in foreign countries too.
Yeah, actually, I thought that was. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, it's like moving from reaction, but into foresight, so that you can now look at data, but with context, to figure out what is fragile and where do you spend your next dollar to stretch it the furthest for biggest impact. And, the US infrastructure is decent, but I don't know if you saw this a few weeks or maybe a month ago, the American Society of Civil Engineers released a report. And even the US infrastructure has an average grade of about C. And I mean, if you think of that for US infrastructure, that is pretty bad for external developing countries too. So for them, it's even much more important how to do this so that you're not waiting for a disaster to hit. You're being proactive and figuring out those solutions and resilient infrastructure right from the get-go.
Yeah, actually, I really like that, because I think, like we've talked about, sort of US aid and a lot of the foreign aid community being scattered to the winds, but also, not just emerging technologies don't just exist in the vacuum that the US might be risking leaving behind now, but also just new opportunities, like you're talking about, like the new technologies that will allow more effective delivery of aid and more resilient infrastructure, as well as like opportunities for stuff like 5G. And I think that's something that I think I'm glad to hear, because I think we'll hear a lot of unfortunate things, and we'll hear about the long-term and continued relevance of US foreign aid going forward. But I think it's also nice to know that, like, there's a horizon of new opportunities there. And I think it was really good to have you sort of hone in on that. And I was wondering if I could just take out one more thing from you, which is sort of thinking about, all of this technology, but how do we use all this aid as applied? And just touching on, like, what's the consequences of losing US aid and that centralized authority, and how do other organizations sort of make up that gap? What are the consequences there?
So the thing to consider over here is that all this infrastructure, like power, telecom, water, they're not cheap. It takes years and a lot of money to build these out. And it's just unrealistic to expect, the US taxpayer to foot the bill for the whole thing all across the world. I don't want to say all across the world, but in a lot of nations where US aid used to be working. But that's where, models like public-private partnership come in. It's how we build things in the US too, right? The public side will de-risk a lot of the investment, but the private side will provide funding and build and construction expertise to actually build it and then eventually profit from the thing. But one thing to consider is this only works overseas if we have the institutions there to protect the investment too. So the job for foreign aid here is not just to build out the partnership, but to also build out the institution that protects the road that is being built and protect the people who are using it. This is what aid used to do in a lot of cases in the past. It used to de-risk private investment so that private investors can go and actually build out grids. They can build out water systems. They can build out road and infrastructure with the hope that in the future that they can actually reap some profit out of it while the nation where they built it also benefits from good infrastructure. But the downside of how we have been doing things in the past is sometimes the process to actually get into aid used to be so onerous. If you're, for example, small company coming up with an innovation and you're staring down like a 200-page proposal and a 6-month wait, it's just not feasible for a small company with very limited resources to actually go and build out some technological improvement for you. You need something a lot more simpler. And USAID actually started doing something like this. They started doing out like DARPA style grants to universities where they would give out some funding where the university also matches the funding, and then the research teams in the university will kind of come up with an idea. They would prototype it, and if it works out, they would take it and scale it out. If it doesn't work out, it gets killed, and that's the end of it. That's how a lot of tech innovation works. I'm not saying it's without its flaws, but it does actually allow a lot of people with ideas to come forward and make their mark or try to improve the process.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that there was a big conference at USGLC, which is another foreign aid advocacy group that happened last month, and one of the things that they talked about there really was the private angle to this, which is this isn't just a loss just for like the American government's opportunities, but also the amount this creates opportunities for new markets, for new commerce, and just for new ideas, and to see systems tested under new data sets and new circumstances. So it was really great to have you on, but I think we should get ready to transition to our live speakers will be coming on soon, but hopefully we'll be able to talk with you more going forwards, and we're looking forward to seeing you as a part of the Alliance.
It was a pleasure to speak with you, Isaac.
All right, got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
All right, cheers. Yeah, so we're just going to be waiting for some final finishing touches to bring on some of the live speakers who are in person in DC. And we've had some hiccups over here. I think everything's going well over there. So I just want to reflect on some of the things we've heard so far, because I think through the night, we're going to hear a lot more about sort of the long-term continued impact and relevance of foreign aid, even if it's sort of in we're in a sort of withdrawing from that, because this is a continuing commitment that lots of Americans are involved in. Like still remains a large amount of support for foreign aid when people are often given consideration towards like the cost of living within the US, and in that context, we're often much more accepting. And so remembering that there is a constituency for this, and there are real consequences, is a really important part of continuing to advocate for foreign aid. It's something that we look for and we look at with the Alliance for American Leadership. Is one of these programs we're working on is like pointing out like, here's the districts in the US that get affected by this. Here's the candidates whose communities will be affected if they continue to facilitate the sort of the closure of US foreign aid. And it's those sort of things I think are really important to bring this home, because like Nalin said, that there's a lot of as a return to all of this, because the US is involved in so much foreign commerce. The developing wealth in other countries usually returns money to ourselves. A lot of foreign aid programs have a 1 to like 11 return, with the US making a profit off of those programs, while also facilitating progress and sustainability in other countries. And that ability both to help other people provide for themselves and also to just be available is just a really crucial part of engaging in the international world, which is something that the US has continued commitments within. And having US foreign aid as a means to interact with people just builds a lot of goodwill and keeps people alive. That's just one of the things that I think has just come through so far and continues, will hopefully continue to come through as we go forwards. Because, well, there's very serious strategic implications to US foreign aid and opening the door and facilitating transfers of information and intelligence. There's also that humanitarian cooperative side. And we are a country which, like he said, after the Marshall Plan, created these alliances and agreements and partnerships that help protect American security. And part of the reason we were able to rely on countries like Germany or France or other countries devastated by war to deter or defend against the Soviet Union was because we took the opportunity and we provided aid to help them rebuild themselves, and they didn't have to suffer through the immense poverty that had led to so much uncertainty in the 1930s. And so US foreign aid is not just something that ended today and will come back in like a couple of years or however long. It's a continuing strategic imperative that we've seen throughout American history, and it's come in many different forms. But the ability to assist others, communicate with others, engage with others, and provide for others, and to make the most of those relationships is just something of continuing relevance. And one of the things that I always found very compelling for working with the Alliance for American Leadership is how many different kinds of people we were able to meet and who are involved in this, and how much it reflects the sort of the global presence of the US. And also thinking about the as much difficulty as we've gone through, and like we've even had some uncertainty here, there's still support for that. There's still a need for that. And not letting go of that is super important. And one of the things that one of our main goals here at the Alliance for American Leadership is sort of continuing to hold people accountable for their decisions when it comes to protecting foreign aid, because these are crucial programs that help provide for the American people, some cases directly by subsidizing our farmers, or in other cases by creating jobs, and also for keeping American allies and American partners safe. And so trying to get volunteers ready for upcoming elections, trying to provide information and accountability is just one of these essential things that the Alliance for American Leadership is trying to move forward with. And we're a relatively new organization. We like to make the most of a lot of young volunteers, and also to draw on the experience of a lot more of our more experienced advisory board members and team members, because as much as the sort of the slow dissolution of US aid caused problems and is going to be painful, and even if we are able to bring it back very quickly, there will be some losses that we'll have to spend a long time to rebuild. It's also an opportunity in many ways, because I think everyone can agree there were certain issues with the way foreign aid was being dealt with, and we saw people's concerns when these programs are being cut. But the importance of reform can't be ignored, and we can't just walk away from these commitments. And that's something that we have a real opportunity to do. And now I'm going to just transition us on to our in-person speakers who have been waiting a little bit relatively patiently. So I would just love to let you hear from the people who are in DC, because they're just coming out for support the Alliance for American Leadership. All righty. Hopefully our first speaker will begin soon. All right. You may start whenever you're ready. You can hear me? All right. Can you hear me?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Good evening.
Welcome. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Sorry, it seems we're having
It's rainy and
some.
hot. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here on this rainy, hot summer day. It is an honor to share this moment with you all. My name is Cam Morales, and I am the co-chair of the advisory board for the Alliance for American Leadership, a first of its kind organization dedicated to cultivating the next generation of principled, visionary leadership. It is a shared commitment that brings us here all together tonight, and it is a great pleasure to introduce someone who embodies the very spirit of that mission. He is a dear friend, he is a young leader of exceptional talent, and he inspires and uplifts those around him. He is the driving force behind this movement, and he is the executive director of the Alliance for American Leadership. Please join me in welcoming the executive director, Asher Moss.
Guys, well, thank you guys all for coming out tonight, braving the storm. I know it was crazy out there. I'll tell you, when this event was starting out, we had like maybe 10 people in here at 6:45, and I was like, no one's gonna come. This is not gonna work. Well, sure enough, people showed up. So I'm so grateful to all of you for being here tonight. I also want to say a special thank you to members of our host committee and sponsors this evening. That is Eleanor Mahoney, Cheryl Janey, Lauren Hershey, Evan Davies, Kiara Hepp, Rhonda Leeds, Michael Calhoun, Joel Stent, Cam Morales, of course, Michael Belitsky, Malik Ross, Danny Suarez, Nicole Rogers, Samuel Gertson Schuming, Abigail Bowman, Jordan Henderson, and Ryan Lee. So, big list of people. Give a round of applause for all of them. Round of applause. I also want to thank all the people around the country who are fighting for this cause. To everyone in the USA community who didn't give up when their agency was shut down, but who fought, who stood up for what they knew was right, who stood up for our country, for American leadership, for humanitarian aid, for doing the right thing on the world stage, and for the 14 million lives that all of us know are at risk if we can't get these foreign aid programs restarted. So give a round of applause for everyone in the USA community who is here tonight and who is out organizing around the country. Their advocacy is a reminder that silence is not an option, that we have to speak up and we have to fight back. So what is the Alliance for American Leadership? Why are you guys all here tonight? So we're a nonpartisan political action committee with one simple goal: bring back foreign assistance. We are going to reverse the cuts to foreign assistance programs. So I founded this organization in January after the pause in USAID funding, and I can tell you that the reason I founded it was pretty simple. I was reading stories each day about people whose lives were being lost due to these foreign assistance cuts. I was looking at the PEPFAR impact counter rising every day, knowing about that rising death toll, and I realized we had to do something. So the first thing that I did is I reached out to congressional staffers that I knew. My background is I worked for a while in Jerry Connolly's office, best congressman that I've ever seen. He was Mr. Cornyn, and he was a congressional staffer, and of course he continued that fight on Capitol Hill. So I reached out to people in his office, I reached out to other staffers I knew, and I started asking people to do the same. I said, listen, we can get these programs restarted. We talk to people, and we get the word out there. And slowly, that morphed into this coalition. We now have 500 campaign volunteers in over 39 states. Fighting to restore foreign assistance programs. And those campaign volunteers and field directors are the heart of our effort. Our mission is to make foreign aid a local, priority issue for every member of Congress. When we make strategic investments in foreign aid, it saves lives, strengthens alliances between America and its allies, and bolsters our national security. It also helps nonprofits, small businesses, family farms, other people here in the US that provide that food, medicine, and life-saving care that people around the world depend on. Foreign aid is not just a good investment. It's a local investment in every congressional district. And that is what we are saying to policymakers on the Hill. We recognize that we're not going to win this fight here in DC. We're going to win it in Virginia, in Mississippi, Maine, Indiana, and in my home state of Florida. We're going to win it because of people like Thomas Whitcutt, the youngest nominee for Congress in 2024, who is now organizing hundreds of volunteers for our organization in Florida to fight for foreign assistance. We're going to win it because of people like Nita Hadi, who knocked on 565 doors last week of Walkinshaw's primary campaign, getting out the vote for a hero. We're going to win it because of people like Josh Higginbottom. Josh was the youngest member of the West Virginia House of Delegates. Now he's organizing our chapter in West Virginia. And we're going to do the same thing each state across the country where we believe we can pressure policymakers to restart these foreign assistance programs. So what's our first issue? Most Americans don't understand what the foreign aid budget actually looks like. Polling shows most Americans think we spend 25% budget on foreign aid. Frankly, that would be a bit ridiculous, and we don't. It's less than 1%. So the very first mission of everyone in this room tonight is tell your friends, tell your family, tell your community, we spend less than 1% on foreign aid. And that kind of funding has saved millions of lives and made America a leader on the world stage. It's that simple. And we're going to continue telling that message across the country. We are on track right now to have 10,000 campaign volunteers and field directors on our team by the midterm elections. We have 500 right now, and we're growing by 20 every day. I know people in this room are field organizers. They are recruiting. They are doing an incredible job, and we are building that local support for foreign assistance. But we're also working with policymakers on Capitol Hill to save foreign aid programs. One of our priorities over the past couple months has been protecting funding for PEPFAR. PEPFAR is an HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment program that saved 26 million lives since President Bush started 2 decades ago. And we're explaining to policymakers that this isn't just a humanitarian program, but it has real national security impacts. Guess what? I was having my coffee this morning, first cup, had another one here, reading Punchbowl News, and this is what I saw. The rescissions package touches on foreign aid programs as well as public broadcast funding. Senator Susan Collins, the Appropriations Committee chair, is among the leading skeptics of the proposal. There's also Senator Tom Tillis, a new wild card of sorts after he announced he isn't running for re-election in 2026. Tillis said that while he's sympathetic to the argument that cutting foreign aid undermines national security, he expects to vote yes. I'm planning on supporting it, but there are people who have expressed soft power national security concerns. And this was right after, yesterday, our advocates met with Senator Tom Tillis, our national security team led by General Bo Mahaney and Danny Suarez, and 30 of our constituent advocates met with Senator Tom Tillis' office, and we met with Susan Collins' office, and we explained to them the real national security impact. Because what we fundamentally believe is that when you give good information to policymakers, when you put them in front of experts and their constituents, and maybe if you provide a bit of political backing too, we can change those. And that's the mission. We can bring back foreign. So with that, I want to introduce a member of our board and champion of American leadership, Cheryl Janey.
Thank you, Matt. I'm Cheryl Janey. I'm a retired defense industry executive. I say retired, which means I no longer work for money. But that doesn't mean I don't work. And I'm delighted to be on this board and working with a very important mission of continuing aid, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's vital for America. I have the honor tonight to introduce to you our speaker in a moment, a man who is deeply committed to the community, to our country, and to this cause. Little known fact that I found out earlier, James Walkinshaw's grandfather worked for USAID. He started his career working early for Congressman Jerry Conley, who you've already heard mentioned this evening. And then went on to serve as a supervisor in Fairfax County, Virginia, running local government. As Jerry moved on to his, what I like to call his next adventure, one of the last things Jerry Conley did was work very hard to throw his support behind James Walkinshaw and to get himself and those who knew him active. James won the Democratic primary for the 11th district seat decidedly. It is my pleasure, my honor to introduce to you my friend, James Walkinshaw.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl and I have known each other for a long time. She is an incredible leader here in Washington, but more importantly, in our home of Fairfax County. Thank you for everything that you do and contribute. And to Asher and the Alliance, I am blown away and amazed by what you all have accomplished already. And I so look forward to seeing the incredible things that the Alliance will do. I've been waiting 42 years to say this, but I'm so impressed by what these young people have done. So congratulations to you all. And I am here for a lot of reasons, but I'll give you two. I'm here tonight for Amran and Marwan. And some of you probably read the Washington Post series recently on the impacts of the cuts to U.S. aid and to U.S. foreign assistance. And Amran was a 3-year-old living in South Sudan. And he died in his mother's arms for lack of a very basic medicine. He died of a chest infection. And he died because the United States of America eliminated the funding for the program that had been delivering that medicine to his community for many years. Marwan is his twin brother, who's still here and wondering tonight, I'm sure, where his brother is. And that's why we're all here. All of us who are here tonight are motivated, I know, by the moral imperative of the United States continuing to play an active role in the world. But the importance of the mission of the Alliance is not to speak to the choir of those of us who already believe in the moral imperative, in the hopes of growing that coalition nationally, which is absolutely critical. So thank you for being here and being a part of that. As Cheryl mentioned, I was Jerry Conley's chief of staff for 11 years. As Asher mentioned, he earned the moniker Mr. 4A when he was a young staffer on the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, working for a young senator at the time by the name of Joseph Robinette Biden. And they worked together for many years to expand U.S. assistance across the globe. And his laser focus, commitment, and conviction to the importance of foreign aid never wavered. Whether it was through his defense of PEPFAR, pushing for robust global health funding, standing up for democracy in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, or supporting USA. And let me just stop for a moment. I just want to ask all of the USA employees or contractors to raise their hands. Put your hands up. Any other federal employees, current or former, put your hands up. Let's give all of them a round of applause. I really think that we need to normalize, just as at so many events throughout our nation, we ask our veterans to rise and be recognized for their service appropriately. I think we should be asking all of our federal workers to do the same everywhere in this country for the incredible service that they provide. So thank you all for doing that. Look, this is really important. The stakes are high. We know that across the United States, there is a growing trend toward isolationism. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are the faces of it. They're the ones executing it today, but it doesn't end with them. There is a growing movement for the United States to turn inward, to slash the very tools that have defined our leadership in the post-war era. And the Trump administration's efforts to decimate U.S. aid are not just misguided, they're dangerous. He's proposed cuts of 30, 40, or 50% to all U.S. foreign assistance programs that fight poverty, improve global health, stabilize fragile states, and prevent conflict. And those attacks aren't just on budgets. Those have been attacks on the very people, the folks who had their hands raised, many of whom I hope to represent, who have served in the most challenging circumstances at home and abroad, and they've been targets of smear campaigns, quite frankly. I don't know any other way to describe it. It's despicable to describe career civil servants, most of whom could make a lot more money doing other things, but have decided to dedicate themselves to advancing our American values. They deserve our respect, not to be vilified by conspiracy theories or political attacks. Even worse, those attacks have undermined decades of bipartisan consensus. I was speaking earlier to a Republican who's here about how can we rebuild bipartisanship in this country. And for decades, there was more or less a bipartisan consensus around the importance of the United States playing an active role in the world. That consensus is being decimated today. And when we create a vacuum, and we are creating vacuums across the globe, vacuums don't go unfilled. That vacuum is being filled today, most often by China, through their very aggressive Belt and Road Initiative, which continues their predatory lending practices, their authoritarian model of development. And if we continue to allow that vacuum to persist, they will continue to fill it. And Asher said it well. U.S. foreign aid represents less than 1% of our federal budget. And you all have seen, and some of you probably contributed to the studies demonstrating that the cuts just in the last 6 months have likely led to at least 89,000 unnecessary deaths around the world. And I think if you ask almost any American, including those who voted for President Trump, would you be willing to spend pennies, a couple of pennies as a taxpayer, to save the life of Marwan or 89,000 other people, including children around the world? The answer would be, for most Americans, a resounding yes. But so many myths persist about the amount of our budget that goes to foreign aid. We know here that foreign aid is not just a charity. It keeps us safe. It creates new markets for American goods that benefit American companies and American workers. It helps to contain disease outbreaks before they reach American shores. And it, most importantly, I would say, projects the best of who we are as Americans. Our values, our compassion, our innovation, our ability to deliver life-saving interventions to every corner of the globe. And I think if you're a student of history and you look back at the superpowers throughout history, Roman Empire, the British Empire, the United States of America is unique, far from perfect, but unique in that we have made delivering life-saving interventions, lifting people out of poverty and relieving suffering core to our national mission. It is part of who we are as Americans. And yes, it supports jobs and economic activity here at home, including in Northern Virginia, that I hope to represent in Congress. And cutting funding less than 1% of the total budget does nothing to address the deficit. And all of those reasons are why I am so inspired by the Alliance and the work that you all are doing. You're stepping into that breach and helping to rebuild a bipartisan coalition around smart and strategic engagement. And I think the approach the Alliance is taking makes perfect sense, because I will tell you one thing about politicians. Politicians, in order to be successful, you have to learn what is rewarded and what is punished at the ballot box. All of these high-minded ideas are nice, but at the end of the day, all 535 members of Congress have to wake up thinking about, will my constituents vote for me or against me based on this issue? And we have to show up in the offices of 535 members of Congress with their constituents, making it very clear that if you don't support U.S. foreign aid, we won't support you when you run for re-election. That's what we have to do all across this country, and I'm so appreciative of the Alliance doing that. It is not easy work. As I said, isolationism is surging. Slogans like America First, that we've heard before in this country, threaten to become more than just a slogan and a long-standing policy. But I'm very confident that with folks like the Alliance doing this work, that we can stem the tide and turn this around. If I have the honor of serving in Congress, and I know we have a number of folks from the 11th district here, you have my commitment to work alongside you. I want to see us restore and expand the funding for foreign aid, including USAID, so we can respond to crises around the globe quickly and strategically. We need to protect and restore funding for the Global Fund and PEPFAR, as was mentioned. We need to defend democracy and civil society in the face of rising authoritarianism around the globe. And obviously that is more challenging given the challenges to democracy that we face here at home, but more important than ever. We have to support women's empowerment, education, and economic inclusion in developing nations, because we know those are the investments that have the highest long-term return. And we have to stand up to those in the White House, in Congress, on the campaign trail, who want to turn foreign aid into a punching bag. We got to push for accountability and transparency, no question, in terms of how every American taxpayer dollar is spent. And the programs that we fund have to be measurable and they have to work. And then we have to communicate that to the American people. And I know that's the work that the Alliance is going to continue to do. Thank you all so much for being here from the beginning. I so look forward to see the incredible things you're going to accomplish. I will be right there with you every step of the way. Thank you.
I also want to say thank you one more time to the 30 volunteers from the Alliance for American Leadership for phone banking, canvassing, and getting out the vote for James. We are so happy to be behind James, and we're going to be behind him in the general election as well. So let's give it up for them. James was saying was absolutely right. We need to work with members of Congress, tell them that their constituents, that their voters will be there for them if they're there for us on foreign aid. And with that, I would like to introduce the co-chair of our board, Joel Stennett.
First of all, I want to thank you all today for taking the time out of incredible busy schedules to come to speak with us and hear from us about why we care about the Alliance for American Youth. For those of you who don't know me, as one way of introduction, my name is Joel Stennett. I'm the co-chair here with Morales. And I want to speak briefly to you about why foreign aid, in particular this organization, is incredibly important to me. With all the division in this country, I find it imperative that we get involved, particularly get involved in causes that we care about. As a proud child of an immigrant, I found and I was taught to love this country, and the best way to love the country is by getting involved. Yet people not too far from this location who would tear down the wall and all these relationships that we've built over the past 50 years. And personally to me, in my family's home country, we've had China come in, develop roads and develop roads that we see in West Africa. And now America, our adversaries, out our back door. Now, personally, I don't think that's a great idea. However, if you personally don't believe that foreign aid that matters for people, we talk about all the economic things. But we're not getting into this right now. I believe overall, it's imperative that we give back, we share with each other our relationships, our resources, and overall make America better by providing each other around the world with our graces. I also want to formally introduce a former worker of USAID and a proud advocate of this mission, Dr. Megan O'Rourke. Dr. Megan O'Rourke has over a decade of experience working with USAID in Cambodia as an FSL and as implementing partner in the innovation. He most recently worked as the lead change scientist for the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And before joining that, she was a tenured professor at Virginia Tech for sustainable agriculture. There she worked on the USAID Integrated Pest Management Innovation Lab in Cambodia, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Before that, he was also working in USAID in Nepal. So, her background is she has a PhD in agricultural ecology from Cornell University, a master's in etymology and agronomy from Iowa State University, and a bachelor's in biology from Stony Brook University. Finally, she is a book fellow with Congresswoman Kelly Pingree, which she serves as Senior Agriculture and Environment Advice. So please give a warm welcome to my dear friend, Dr. Megan O'Rourke.
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you especially to my fellow ex-federal workers and USAID colleagues. I know this is an incredibly difficult time, and we never would have thought 6 months ago that we would be here today. It would have been unimaginable. I'm asking you guys as a professor, so please raise your hand if you remember January 20th. Or when you first read the horrible executive order entitled Reevaluating and Realigning United States Foreign Aid. Remember that? I was awake late that night when all those executive orders poured down. It was dark, I was at my kitchen table, my husband was blissfully snoring in the bedroom. And I read those executive orders and I was shocked. And I called my best friend, Alexis Irwin, over here. She was still with USAID at that point in time, not as of July 1st. And we tried to reassure ourselves. We tried to pretend that everything was going to be okay. And it wasn't. It wasn't going to be okay at all because we were entering this brave new world, this dystopian world that we could never believe that we would be a part of. We cannot bury our heads in the sand and say that we're America first. We are part of the broader world. And we see what happens in the vacuum. China steps in, Russia steps in. The world needs to have international development. And if we're not there with American values being part of the world, then other countries are going to spread their message instead. I have always wanted to work in international development. When I was a teenager, I remember telling the bishop at my church, very idealistically, that someday I would be a diplomat. Yeah. 15 years later, though, actually, I had my PhD, I had a husband, I had 3 children, and I actually was packing up my bags because we were moving to Cambodia. I was going to be working with USAID as a climate change advisor. And in fact, we had our diplomatic passports in hand. And that was the day that I felt like I had really achieved my dreams. In Cambodia, it was a Feed the Future country, and we did really important work there. We were helping to raise yields of rice and vegetable production, and we were helping to preserve forests that were community forests that were otherwise slated to be cut down for development purposes. But it was more than just that, right? We did work that never shows up in a spreadsheet, that never gets reported to Congress. What we were doing was forging these deep, lasting relationships with the local workers, with the contractors we work with every day. In fact, I became so close with my teacher at the embassy, and knock on wood, because he still has a job for now, that 6 years after my family packed out of Cambodia, we were still in touch, and he offered to host my daughter with his family for a year after she graduated high school as a gap year. She taught English, she lived with the family, and in their communal, kind of more communal way of living, slept in the same room with the cousin of the family. And one day I was actually visiting over there because I still continued to work as an implementing partner while I was a professor. And so every year I would go back to Cambodia, Bangladesh, and Nepal, work on innovation lab projects. And the family sat me down, 2 chairs, and I didn't quite know what was happening, but I was getting proposed to as a mother to set up my daughter with their nephew. And frankly, I would have been all for it. I loved their family. My daughter, on the other hand, was a little less keen. So again, I will say that she did end up eloping with the man she met in Australia just 2 years after that. So yeah, so working with USAID, I've worked in a bunch of places, right? And it's more than a job. It's a passion. It's a way of life. When I was in Cambodia, I was never more proud to be an American than when I was there. I lived where I saw a government regime that did not respect human rights, that did not respect or even value the humanity of their own citizenry. And I loved being an American more than ever before. That is what we bring. It may not be written down in metrics. It may not be reported, but we bring a love of humanity and our culture and sharing that to the world. And we have lost that under this administration. I believe that today we are at a historic moment. There is pain and suffering that especially my colleagues here at USAID feel deeply, but we have the opportunity to plant the seed, to regrow what USA looks like. This door has closed, and we never would have chosen that. We would never have chosen to lose our jobs. But this is an opportunity also where I feel that we can reimagine, to rebuild. Today, as of July 1st, like we should all take the time to mourn, but we also can heal and then rebuild and to create something new and beautiful and spectacular. And I believe that, and I thank very much being here and the opportunity to see this movement catalyze so that we will not be traumatized by this administration. In fact, this administration thought that they could hurt us, that they could push us around and traumatize us, but they had no idea what was coming when they fired, pushed out tens of thousands of smart, hardworking, dedicated civil servants. Yes. They have something great for them because we will not be silent. We have the dedication and perseverance that in 2026, times they are changing. And we are going to help make them change.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I think we may have lost our connection here, but let me just hi, folks. Sorry about that. I think we've just lost our connection. We're just going to have some technical difficulties going forwards. I think just because we aren't able to reach that, if we aren't able to reach that, I think we will be bringing in Let Kirsch. Otherwise, hopefully we'll be able to get the feedback going again from a live event. We apologize for any disruptions. It's been very chaotic setup recently, just with the storm going on and the in-person event and the uncertainty going on at the live stream. But we live and we learn, and we're really looking forward to launching more of these in the future. And going forwards, I think I would just like to comment on some of the things that we heard from the live speakers there, which I think is really interesting how much they talked about the jobs being lost by American citizens. I think that's a very large part of it, and also focusing on sort of the regional impact of foreign aid and making people accountable to that. And that's something that I think James Walkinshaw understands better than most people because he's a successor, like they said, of Jerry Connolly. And in that, he is the successor of, Mr. Foreign Aid. And that role is something that he's going to have to fill in for. And in that, he understands that his constituency expects certain things from him, and part of that is foreign aid. And a lot of his constituency, as we saw when he raised people's hands, are government workers who have lost their jobs in this process. And it's sort of the holistic scene of the foreign international aid community as a whole being affected by this. I think is something that it really sticks with us. But despite the storm, despite the technical issues, we're still here, and foreign aid is still here. And there's a long important continuity of foreign aid that isn't going to change. The necessity is still there. And as long as that necessity is there, the Alliance for American Leadership and other programs are going to continue to sprout up because these are something that the American people expect. And as long as we can communicate that, we'll continue to communicate to their own elected representatives. And at the end of the day, communicating the importance of these programs is the ultimate goal of the Alliance for American Leadership, and in many ways, the ultimate goal of democracy, to allow people to advocate for their own interests. And foreign aid is often their own interests, particularly in my community. I live in Minneapolis, and in Minnesota, we have lots of organizations that benefit from foreign aid and help other people benefit from foreign aid. For example, in Duluth, there's a big program to get people from around the world to come and learn technical skills that can be used to facilitate projects in their own countries, such as ports in Kazakhstan, which they learned about port infrastructure, I think, for the A4AL Sea from us. And those relationships, those connections, and also like even if you're like a leisure worker in like a hotel, the money that comes in is really valuable. And just thinking about sort of the national security side of things, that was crucial for facilitating the exports of Kazakhstan's strategic resources, particularly oil, to the international community, away from traditional U.S. adversaries like China and like Russia. And the ability to open new opportunities for other countries, whether that's through our leading technology from agricultural to medical sciences, is something that the U.S. has to make the most of. And U.S. foreign aid was an excellent way to make the most of that, as well as helping to keep people safe and secure and healthy. And one of the reasons why we continue to harp on PEPFAR is not just that it's an extremely cost-effective program, not just that it saves a lot of lives, not just that it has an empirically proven record of facilitating stability operations that are crucial to our strategy and military operations in regions affected, but also that it keeps Americans safe, because these are diseases that we've learned from COVID don't stay behind borders and don't care about the rules. So having those relationships is just so crucial. And I think it's one of the things that sort of it comes back into my mind is such communication is just those relationships and reinforcing those relationships and building those connections. And we have those relationships at home as well with these people whose jobs and livelihoods and families were tied up in foreign aid and who have lost that. And making sure that there's some restitution for that is just another one of these crucial projects that in some ways we're going to help hopefully work towards, because with the restoration of foreign aid, we will see more money coming into the U.S. economy. We will see more jobs coming, and we will see the U.S. able to, assert itself and influence and communicate with the international community. And at the end of the day, it's not hard power, it's not missiles, and it's not just investing directly into the U.S. economy, but it advances all of these interests, and the fungibility of that, the ways that it can change all aspects of relationships is just so crucial. And even though the current administration has removed USAID as sort of own independent organization, they've still recognized that it needs to have a continuing role and sort of like being folded into the US State Department, which it's good that a lot of that organization can still be usable, and we want foreign aid to return to other countries, and we want to continue to engage with the world. But USAID had so much expertise that has been lost. It had so much specialization that has been lost. And it had a lot of value as an independent agency. And I think like Mahoney said,
foreign aid continues to be shut down. Those are lives that will be lost over the next 5 years.
I would say that it's just
impossible. We have to
impossible.
work together. So pressure on Congress and make some sort of difference here. So give a round of applause to all of our volunteers. Tonight, we've shown what's possible. We've had policymakers, diplomats, USAID employees, Democrats, Republicans, implementers, leaders in this room tonight showing what it looks like to bring back foreign aid. And this is just the first of dozens of launch parties that we have planned across the country to show that local support for foreign assistance. So I'm so glad you're all here tonight. I also do want to say something personal. I think you guys might have realized by now, but I'm not the oldest guy in this room. I just graduated from college. I still got student loan debt to repay. But tonight, I've decided to make a $5,000 contribution to the Alliance for American Leadership. And I'm doing that because I believe in what we're doing. I believe in this movement. I believe it will work. I believe we will bring back foreign aid programs. And everyone here, every implementer, every former USAID employee who's lost their job will get their job that, and we'll be doing that incredible work across the world, preserving American leadership, saving lives, doing what you know you have to do. I believe in what we're doing. And I also want to ask, if you guys don't mind, open up your phone. Everyone open up their phone, please. I want you to text A4, the number 4, AL, to 53555. That's A, the number 4, AL, to 53555. If you want to donate $5, cover the drinks from tonight, go for it. $5 is great. You said, maybe you heard something meaningful tonight, want to donate 50, do it. You want to donate, 500, 5,000, be a leader in our group, do it. And please reach out to me too, reach out to Cam, reach out to Joel. Let us know if you want to be part of our coalition. You want to be a campaign volunteer, you're interested in being a senior policy advisor or a member of our advisory board, let us know. If you want to be a field director, state chair, organize your state for American leadership, let us know. Be a part of this coalition tonight. And finally, I want to recognize a few of our incredible donors who have agreed to double every donation made tonight. So I want to give a round of applause to Joel Stennett, Cam Morales, and Michael Belitsky, and our other donors who have all agreed to double contributions made tonight. So thank you guys. Do what you can. Please help us. Let's rebuild American leadership. Let's restore foreign aid. Reach out to me. Be part of our coalition. Thank you. Have a drink and have a great night. Thank you all.
Weird now. Alrighty, everyone. It was good to hear from Asher, and we're just going to try and get Lilette in here, because we've had a couple of discussions about foreign aid in the broad strokes, but I think it would be really good to listen to someone who's on our advisory board and really talk a lot about her own personal experience, because one of the things I think I really appreciated hearing from. Oh, hello, Lilette. Are you able to hear me? I can't hear you if you're muted. Sorry, I'm unable to hear you. Hello? Sorry, I can't hear you. Nope, sorry. All right, I think we're going to see if she can leave and rejoin. But I guess the point I was trying to get there was that Lilette has a lot of experience looking at local politics with, I believe it was Harris County in Texas, and sort of where does this international community intersect with the US? Because one of the great wonders of the 21st century to really see how much of an impact the international community can make on the US, how much impact the US can make an international community, not just as countries, but as individuals and as businessmen and as small businesses and as families. Because lots of people have families in these countries which are having their foreign aid suspended. And lots of those people are voters, which I think is something we shouldn't lose sight of. And those people are also people who these foreign aid cuts have very real consequences for. As much as it's very easy to get lost in the big numbers, it's also important to remember that there are people behind all of these numbers. Hello?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Welcome back.
Awesome. Thank you. Technology.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Because I remember we were having concerns about the storm affecting all of this, but I'm glad you were able to make it in, and glad everyone was able to make it in person.
Yes, Texas. It's actually close to San Antonio. And I know a lot of people are forgetting Texas is gigantic. So just going from from Houston to end to cross the border. It's about 11 and a half hours. So we are a huge state. So sometimes what's happened on one end of the state, we have no awareness of that. I mean, we hear it from news.
Wow. Yeah, I know you have very bad storms on your side, and hopefully everything is turning out okay. But we've had a lot of hardship in the entire international aid community. But I think I would like to keep going and get back on track here now that we're able to sort of get you online here. And I was just wondering if you could start by just telling us a little bit about your community, Harris County and the International Advisory Council that you were in there, and how did you first get involved with foreign aid?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so with the Harris County International Advisory Team, what drew me to it was first of all, I'm international. At that time, I was working in West Africa, Gabon, and I've saw that there is a major need for us to be more engaged. And um, when the United States is engaged with other countries and brings the diversity to back to us, I think that builds a platform for diversity, international partnership, for cultural, economic growth, for everyone. So it's a win-win for all the countries who are involved. And more I was being involved with the Harris County International Advisory Council, more I saw that all the efforts that we're bringing to the table, that we're engaging all the councils that are represented here in Houston, they were highly engaged. They were coming to the meetings. They were bringing great ideas, and they bringing introductions to the table, and that really helped us to start up. And we call our community as a melting pot of diversity. It really helped us to create meaningful long-term partnerships that were beneficial, very beneficial, both economically and culturally.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way to frame it. 'Cause I think again we've talked about this, but tonight we've talked about sort of the local connections that international aid has, even in terms of like Congress people, and in terms of even families. And I was just wondering if you could talk just very briefly, because I know you talked about it a little bit already, but I was curious if you have any specific examples of maybe you're thinking about your time in Gabon, work with Gabon, I should say. Have you ever like examples of opportunities being created for like local businesses or the community because of this international engagement?
So a lot of things that we did in Gabon and other countries while I was serving as a member for the International Council involved things like bettering the healthcare, helping with the trade business. We were doing a lot of, my company was involved in oil and gas. So we are bringing not just jobs to the countries that we're trying to support, but we're also doing a lot of corporate social activities there, meaning that we were helping to build their infrastructure. There were remote villages, for example, that they did not have simple things like teachers wouldn't go and be there because they did not have schools or classes or any logistics to even physically be there. So we would help them to with building the roads, making sure that they are able to build some infrastructure for children to attend schools. We're trying to help and educate the teachers. We had special programs and we're engaging with the US embassy there to ensure that we can build some structures where we can teach the local professionals or give them more education if possible to kind of educate younger generation and be more supportive. So at the same time, the Ministry of Hydrocarbon had a delegation to come here and met with, at that time, the Harris County judge at Ahmed. So that was a very beneficial meeting because we were able to engage other local companies here And we had a beautiful meeting where they were learning about the country. They were learning the ways that they can either invest in the country and how we can also gain some benefits from them coming here and teaching us something or bringing something interesting. You have to keep in mind that people who live here, like myself and others, who see in the governments that our cultures, our countries are represented, it gives us the sense of pride, that sense of engagement. And local artists, entrepreneurs, young professionals, they learn and they are more willing to volunteer, to promote, to invest in their home countries if their parents they're from there, or they're first generation who live in United States. And I think that is extremely important, because this way we are promoting humanitarian causes, we're promoting ideas, we're promoting investment opportunities.
Yeah, I like the way you frame that, as you have your local community and you have these other communities, which you have multiple layers of interaction, not just the government connects you with these other people, but you have people who have roots in these other countries and can form meaningful relationships. And beyond like just even the individual level of what that can mean for American citizens and for people living abroad, and for the business implications and for the artistic implications, and how much of, I'm sure you've seen it better than me, of like how much that can really help enrich like US like society. But also just that level of interaction, that level of relationship is just super crucial for all the things that the US wants to be involved in doing in other countries, to build the trust, to build these relationships, and to know that there's just people on either side. And I just keep coming back to this. We can always talk about the numbers, we can always talk about the statistics, but there's just people behind all of that. And just thinking about people for a minute, I was just wondering if you had to think about just like one thing you think people don't understand about foreign aid, or you think, I guess, if you wish you could communicate something about foreign aid to people more broadly, what would it be?
Absolutely. To me, foreign aid is not a charity. It's an education. It's something that we invest, and we keep forgetting. If you look around what is happening right now in the world with all the wars, and this is a ripple effect of not having the right representation, not having right education. We If we do this properly, and if we bring investments, if we bring economic growth, like I said, it's not going to be a charity. It's going to be something that people in the countries, they don't want to migrate. They will stay in their countries. They will develop. They will, be more in a more positive place to develop their countries. And in this case, we won't have what we are seeing right now. I mean, the migration levels are extremely high. And it is reflecting on our economy, and it's reflecting on our country's overall health. So I think like keeping your neighbors safe and healthy, it also gives us the stability to grow in our economic, in our diversity, in our art and culture.
Yeah, yeah, it reminds me a lot of what FDR would say about Lend Lease, which is, when your neighbor's house is burning down, you just give them your hose, because you don't need that entire neighborhood to burn down first. And I also like that James Walkinshaw talked about helping with education for women, and access to the internet, like what Nalin said, which is the idea, which is there's a lot of ways we can make more equitable and more fair societies through foreign aid. And as much as you can frame this from a sense of like, you do get, when you give women education, you facilitate access to education, you access these resources, you get more stable, more equitable societies, which require less military spending. I think it was General Petraeus, who was former Secretary of Defense, who said, if you don't fund the State Department fully, I'll need to buy a lot more bullets. And there's real consequences for not taking care of other countries. And I think that's one of the things that I think continues to stand out to me, is like I said before, the continuing relevance there. And if I just could hone in on one more thing, it would be, I suppose also the way you describe it reminds me a lot of like something very foundationally American in like the founding fathers' liberal sense of there being a lot of wealth in the world, and a lot of wealth in the US, all these natural resources, and that we all can benefit from making the most of that. And it's like when you have more wealthy countries, it's not just they cause less problems, it's also that you can, you know, make the most of the resources that both of you have, sort of that comparative advantage thing. I think it's incredible to really see how nonpartisan this really can be when it's become so partisan.
It is, and if we're talking about, for example, female rights and what is happening, what we have here in the United States, and many times, and I'm part of a lot of organizations, I consider, even though with all the challenges that we currently have, we're very blessed, because when I was working abroad, I mean, the scenarios or the real life that they had, it was, I mean, very devastating, to the point where in some government they just refuse to acknowledge that there is sex trafficking, that females have no rights, they cannot vote, and there is so many other ways that they are not represented in the government and they have no say. And it's just everybody turning blind eye. They just like, oh, it does not exist in our country. So meeting with local female groups, educating them, talking to them, explaining them they have rights, that there is other ways for them, because there are many times when I was talking to other females, it comes to a point where they don't believe they have a voice. They don't believe that they can make changes in their life. And that's very upsetting, and it's very devastating. And the only way to help them, it is through education. It is through showing them there is other way. And when you give them a little tiny tool to learn something new, believe me, they are using that and they are becoming very successful in their community, because when they possess a skill or a tool that is a little bit more than the rest of the community, that's their clear path to success and to be different. And to me, having these aids, having the education, helping them, and this is not just about economics, this is also supporting people who are in art, people who have there is a lot of advanced children, like they're extremely skilled, but they have no tools to continue their education, to become something more than they are. So helping to build this for them, helping them, to give them ways to learn, I think is extremely important.
Yeah, it's interesting because I like that we're still continuing on that community thing. I think that's one of the things that great opportunities is available now, is to really hone in on the impact that foreign aid has in its communities. But just thinking, I guess, zooming out a little bit more on the national side of things, where you have the foreign aid, you have the system of foreign aid, making these connections. But on the other hand, you have people who are losing these relationships, and losing these relationships has serious long-term impacts for like trust going forwards, and it takes a while to rebuild that. But also like thinking also a little bit about like sort of the broad, more national side of politics, thinking a little bit about USGLC and their sort of proposals for how they think we should reform foreign aid. Is, this is not just a charity, but also it helps helps other countries make progress. And one of the big priorities you see from a lot of foreign aid sort of reform agencies is the importance of getting people to I don't say stand up for themselves, but to be able to be sort of self-reliant and be able to promote the prosperity of their own neighbors. And I think it's one of those things where all of this stuff can be so very connected. And you're talking about stuff like trafficking or violence, and especially it's like the importance of foreign aid to build relationships to pursue like drug supply chains is hard to understate in dealing with the criminal threats. And these are all things that go beyond borders, and recognizing that. And like same thing with like supply chain security, which is these are all interconnected. And I think the recognition of that just continues to be of like real relevance. And as long as we continue to be part of this globalized world, if you want to have that to be a decent world, you have to put the money down for that, and it's a worthwhile investment, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I've learned through my experience, it's not just helping to build something, but and this is that came back from their feedback when we're trying to understand, when we help them, when we contribute, when we bring some effort or money to the table. They told us one thing that they're liking is maintenance, meaning that if you help them, for example, to build a school and then you leave, in 5 years that school is going to start declining. Why? Because the maintenance part is never being considered. Meaning when you bring them, you give them any tool, you do anything. And I think a lot of heartaches that we are having, it is because in some programs we were giving the initial budget, but there is nothing that continuously being done for that project, meaning that we didn't train electricians, we didn't train, I don't know, maintenance guys to go to watch over that building or to whatever project. I'm bringing building as an example, but in a more global sense, when we are trying to prevent or we're trying to build something, we have to think also long term, like how in which increments we have to follow up, and how we need to ensure that that project is not short lived, that that money is not done and being wasted in one project. So how we can make sure that it has a meaningful and long-term impact.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that comes back to one of the things that we've all talked about, and one is something that I think some people had some hope about and still do, which is the importance of reform within foreign aid. And as much as we've talked about throughout tonight, and I think what we'll see for a long time is foreign aid has been spread out to the wind a lot, but there is some opportunity in that. It's one of the great things talking to you and talking to Nalin about, like, there is something really like decent about this thing that we have, and there's opportunities in the future for when foreign aid is sort of able to return, and thinking about those new opportunities, and also the ability to just make change now that things are more uncertain and there's less of sort of an established way of doing things. And it's not necessarily the kind of hope that we desire, but it's the kind of hope that we often have, and it's the hope that we use to make things really work. I mean, we think about where foreign aid came from in the very beginning, thinking about like the post World War II international order. People really did have to take the leap, and we were able to enjoy a lot of peace because people were able to take that leap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're quite busy. We should probably get ready to get the next guest on, but it was great having you on.
Well, thank you so much. This was really nice meeting. And if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to help or answer any other questions you have.
Yeah, it was great to hear from you. Hopefully we'll get to talk later. It was a lot of fun, actually.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Goodbye to that.
Bye.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stuck with me is it's even in the you saw in like the live events, there's a lot of people who have lost a lot from this, but there's also a lot of opportunities, and there's still a future to this. And I think we talked about this at the very beginning. The continuity, the continued relevance of foreign aid is something that isn't going to go away. And it's like we've talked about, it's about keeping it relevant. It's about recognizing the local impact, getting lawmakers to care and see the consequences, getting the average person to see the consequences and care. And as Leth was talking about, the engagement it creates in the community, the economic opportunities, the cultural opportunities, the political opportunities to say, this matters to me, I want to get involved in this, and how that can facilitate, economic exchange and cultural exchange is just phenomenal. And I think it's something that we can often forget, but it's very much something that we can be at risk of losing. And I think that's one of the reasons why, we say, it's, if you want to get involved with the Alliance for American Leadership, now is the best time, because there's a lot of opportunities to make a change now that there's uncertainty. And once foreign aid slowly starts to return, maybe there's a real opportunity for that to be reformed as well as restored. And one of the big messages I think we take away from a lot of our meetings at the Alliance for American Leadership is that essential truth, which is, we don't need a retreat. We need reform. We need change. And we need a future as well. And the economic opportunities there are incredible. The strategic implications are incredible, and the humanitarian implications are incredible, because they are, I think, one of the things that has been proposed by the administration is they're only really cutting, waste, fraud, and abuse. And while there were certainly issues, and a lot of times favors were dealt with towards ambassadors for reasons I don't think were always understandable in Washington. Fundamentally, many of these programs keep people alive, and waste, fraud, and abuse as a share of that was microscopic. I mean, E4A itself is such a small part of the American budget. I think it's one of the great statistics that I recall is that the average American, like we were talking about earlier, thinks we spend too much on foreign aid, but they think the amount that we spend should be much greater than it actually is. And it's that cost effectiveness, it's the reciprocity of that relationship that is really great. And on the topic of that, I would like to bring on James Caladron and possibly Vincent Mao if he's available, because I think getting these two people together would be a really great conversation. So I'm just going to let James on, and we're going to talk a lot about, I guess, more focusing on the strategic side of things. I know James has talked and studied a fair amount on the security of fragile states. And as much as we like to talk about hope and optimism, there are very serious strategic consequences that we should talk about. Hello, James.
Hi, Isaac. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah. Hello, James. I can hear you.
Nice. I can hear you too.
It's good to have a pristine introduction. All right. Will you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Because you're a member of you're one of our national security directors, and so we just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we can get right into these questions.
Yeah. So right now I'm in graduate school studying national security at Columbia University, with my focus right now intending to be a risk assessment and counterterrorism. I started my career in international affairs back in 2022 when I was a sophomore in undergrad. In that role, I was, assisting Afghan evacuation efforts, and I was able to see, how humanitarian assistance can overlap with foreign policy. Previously, my focus was more on American foreign policy than, communicating with those on the ground in Afghanistan. I was able to tailor that and led me into my role right now.
Nice. Yeah, I suppose it's not a complete accident that looking at American foreign policy leads you to looking at American foreign aid, because we are we are and we were probably will still be. We talk about as a massive provider of foreign aid, and just looking at, I guess, thinking about that, I believe your specialty in a lot of cases was thinking about fragile states. That's something we've touched on before. But can you talk a little bit about the impact that foreign aid has on fragile states, or states that are, that struggle with these issues around sort of irregular warfare or terrorism?
Yeah, of course. I'm sorry if I look over, I just have some notes and figures I want to hit on as my response.
Yeah.
So I always thought the best way to paint examples of foreign assistance is through case studies. And I thought probably one of the strongest case studies right now of successful U.S. foreign assistance was Plan Colombia, which in its name addressed Colombia's when it was a very fragile state. So that began during the Clinton administration, when the President Clinton committed $1.3 billion in aid and supplied Colombia with 500 military personnel to train local forces. And that would continue under President Bush. So again, like we've hit all night, this is traditionally a bipartisan effort.
Yeah.
And then the main goal of that plan was to support the Colombian government combating drug trafficking, insurgency from FARC, and Colombia's overall fragility as a state. And it was proved very successful. Colombia was able to transition into a nearly failed state to a more stable and functional democracy that it is right now. And to do that, and to be able to make that transformation, American aid supported alternative livelihoods for coca farmers instead of supplying the drug traffickers. Improved governance in rural areas, which saw a lot of these FARC insurgents. Overall strengthening Colombian judicial and security institutions. There's the report came out from the US. They estimate that 72% of cocaine production actually decreased as a result of these efforts. That number is disputed. However, you can't really dispute that the security threat is quite as extreme as it was back then. And of course, you have other examples. I think the big one historically would be the Marshall Plan, of successful U.S. foreign assistance. And then the big one today in the news is definitely Ukraine. So yeah, it's very, foreign aid is not charity. It's definitely a part of security strategy and not something that should be forgotten about.
Yeah, and I think that that message of like there's people have all right to be skeptical about foreign aid, and we've talked about the importance of reform, but there's a measurable impact there, and I love that you can I can tell you're a policy guy because you said this is the number, but there's some details behind the number that it's worth inspecting, which is always good to hear, and it's good to be rigorous about this, and evaluating programs through congressional evaluation programs and doing all of this accountability is crucial because we do want the American taxpayers' money to go to important causes. But it's just these things need to be done, and they'll be done in the future because of just the strategic necessity of these things. But even if they're on retreat now, it's something that's going to come back. And I'm actually curious about your work in Afghanistan and thinking about the power vacuums, but I'm going to let on Vincent Mao, who I've previously interviewed on sort of Chinese related subjects and is also one of our technical leads for thinking about AI. So I'm just going to let him on and I'll ask you guys both this question. I'm curious to see the discourse there. Hello, Vincent, can you hear us? All right, Vincent. All right.
Hi, Zach.
Hello?
Hey, James. How are you?
Hello, Vincent.
Hi, Vincent, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I guess so. The question I was particularly hoping to ask both of you guys is, do you have any reflections on the differences between the U.S. and China and sort of how they engage in international aid, particularly thinking about countries like Afghanistan?
Yeah, maybe I can start. Just get the ball rolling. I think from what I have been observing is that I think the US has taken more like a top-down approach with the Afghanistan government working with the central government. There are nation building process like that, where China hasn't really worked with Afghanistan when America was involved. But after the kind of the United States pull out of the I think troops from Afghanistan, Chinese government has worked with Taliban government for some economic reforms, but they're also very cautious on like like the level of the engagement. For instance, Chinese government hasn't really acknowledged the Taliban government as a legitimate government, but they do accept them to send an ambassador to work with Beijing. So I think the Chinese way is more focused on the economy versus the broader picture that United States focus on like national security, counterterrorism. But that may change later on as China is getting more involved in that region.
Yeah, and the connections there with Pakistan and these contested territorial claims, it's not a fluke that China has interest in these geopolitical regions, and that when they're able to invest in these countries, build infrastructure oftentimes that they need as much as other countries need, that they're increasingly willing to form agreements with these other powers. And I would just like to bring this to James because I know this region is sort of your specialization, thinking about those differences and these comparison contrasts.
Yeah, so I think Vincent hit a lot of the main points around the head. The U.S. did take a much more like whole of government approach, and they took a lot of responsibility in Afghanistan. I think a good example of that right now, well, I guess not right now, it was back in 2001 when the Taliban first fell, was the Afghan Ministry of Health inherited this devastated health system. And U.S. investment in the area heavily targeted at health and devised the basic packages of health services, which obviously aim to rebuilding their healthcare system based on 7 components, that being maternal and newborn health, child health and immunization, nutrition, communicable diseases, mental health, disability, and as well as providing essential drugs. Some people may argue that the U.S. may have bitten off more than they can chew in Afghanistan. The Chinese have proven to be more economically focused. Afghanistan is a very strategic location for the Belt and Road Initiative. And a lot of success of that initiative depends on the stability of Afghanistan, as the country provides the shortest route between China, the Middle East, and the Persian Gulf. January 2023, the Xinjiang Central Asia Petroleum Gas Company signed their first major contract with the Taliban-led government to further expand oil extraction in northern part of the country of Afghanistan. I'm sorry. So yeah, just based on those two examples, it's kind of differing visions of how foreign assistance can be implemented. U.S. is more focused on maybe democratic statecraft, and then China's predominantly focused on economic and strategic returns.
Yeah, and I would say I'm just thinking about a previous conversation I actually had with Vince, but I just want to touch on this, which is, what you're talking about is the Chinese building facilities with their own companies in another country, which is a strategically advantageous relationship, and the U.S. being less involved in right now, even less likely to be involved in the future, and where that pushes people when they're interested in development. But we also should like recognize, when China provides these opportunities, when China provides foreign aid and the U.S. isn't, there can be serious conflict. Even if they're not involved in state building, the Chinese system, the Chinese, standardization of products, the Chinese language, and Chinese strategic interests, those will fill in the gaps, and there will be influence, even if they don't, go in and get involved in state building in the same way we do. People see our competitors taking action, and they're going to listen. They're going to wonder which system is the best, the one that's providing for them, or the one that retreated. And like I said, I would leave the details of sort of like the Chinese modernity sort of question to Vincent, if you have any reflections on like the implications of that as from the Chinese perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely see that China is taking a very interesting path, is not promoting their domestic political system. Instead, they focus on like building the roads, building the economic infrastructure, which exactly as you said, that is a very appealing to authoritarian regime or non-democratic like government. For instance, like a Taliban government, they seems to be very close to Chinese government because at one hand, they don't have to reform the government to change their existing political system, and then they can quickly get the infrastructure. I think if we look at the longer term, if United States didn't get more involved going forward, the chance is like the government will be more and more close to Chinese government. At the same time, their economy might be rising because of the Chinese like export. At the same time, may put United States in a very disadvantaged position. Is like we're pulling out of support, but the Taliban government is authoritarian and is still doing very well. Then it's kind of counter the story we're trying to build here. Yeah.
Yeah. I have some thoughts on that, but James, do you want to build on it?
Yeah, I think Vincent covered a good amount. China, most of their efforts is economic. They're not like the United States that's going to come in here, rebuild these institutions. I remember, I can't remember his name, but these provide their own challenges. I remember debt traps being brought up, and then kind of reins more people in more of these countries under Chinese control.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting to that, and the way Vince, the way you sort of think about that is it doesn't strictly matter if the Chinese do or do not promote their own sort of frame of reference, and all countries are allowed to be involved in making agreements and making arrangements. But when the U.S. isn't involved in that conversation, if our values are democracy, we should be involved in conversations talking about democracy, talking about authoritarian regimes, and dealing with corruption and dealing with all these issues, because we don't want our money to go into a black hole, which is part of the reason why we emphasize these reforms. And it's part of the responsibility that comes with the U.S. foreign aid package, not just the humanitarian development, but sort of, we talked about it before, which is like making relationships building communities, and building partnerships. There's a lot to that, and not being involved in that really leaves a vacuum behind. And I was just curious for Vince, because I think we talked a little bit about the role of technology with some of our previous people. But I was curious if you could talk a little bit about sort of the competing spheres of, I guess, technology and foreign aid, and how the U.S. retreating from that affects how people will, I guess, take on these emerging technologies.
Yeah, I think right now we see like there are two major players in AI. One is the dominant power, United States, a lot great startups, and also the other is China. I think China has a lot of very advanced AI companies. They are working very diligently trying to bring the technology aboard through the initiative they have previously, like Build and Road. They rebranded a digital Build and Road initiative. So for nations like that, accepting the technology from China will be part of the bundle deal China offered. And going forward, with that infrastructure built, it will be harder for the United States to kind of penetrate in that market. And from the more like a national security or international security perspective, the AI technology is at different level than the previous the traditional infrastructure we see, right? It collects people's data and it will simulate scenarios. And at a certain instance, you can also increase the chance, like a society sentiment towards certain things. I think that all provides some risk for United States in general. And then another piece I would say is a technology. Right now is more diversified. It's not just AI. There are also 5G. There are also like EV, which we know that China is producing a lot of batteries and also exporting a large amount of EV cars to those developing countries as part of their plan to increase the sustainability locally. So I do see that is not just one technology, but I think there are so many different technologies that China is kind of using as part of their bundle deals.
Yeah, and I think it brings me back to when James was talking about sort of the U.S. being involved in a lot more of a humanitarian side of things compared to a lot of heavy industry, which is, people will say, this is just sort of like the U.S. feeling very sympathetic, or just very being just very very personal. But it's also, I think, when you think about the technological side of things, we are a world leader in agriculture, especially like if you're where I'm from. So I'm from Minnesota. We helped launch the like the Green Revolution post World War II, which increased birth rates, help people's life outcomes, and helps ward off famines. And we also are leaders in medical sciences. And being able to leverage those through humanitarian aid is one of the crucial advantages we do have, because the Chinese can produce EVs very affordably. And if you're not already in a good relationship with the US, and if we're not as capable of bringing people into those relationships and getting that trust because of foreign aid retreat, the most affordable way to get 5G, to get electrification, a lot of that is through China. And just to hone in on this one last point, because I would like to get James on this, is so just thinking about the big takeaways, the big messages that we have with Luleth. Like, what do you think is something you want to communicate about the consequences strategically of getting rid of losing foreign aid in the way that we are?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I just cut out for a second.
Oh yeah, sorry. I know that like we've had lots of people on, and everyone's been going through some kind of storm, whether they've been in Texas or whether they've been in DC. But the question I was trying to hit on is thinking about what is the strategic consequences you want to communicate behind retreating from foreign aid?
Yeah, so strategically, I think there's kind of two main things that come to my mind immediately. Strategically, foreign aid is the cornerstone of soft power, which, is kind of just like gaining influence for, let's say, like good deeds almost. This assistance helps shape the world in the ways that would benefit United States interest. I think when a lot of people think of foreign aid, they think of issues that are far, far away. But what they may not realize is that those issues that are, yeah, they're far away, but they can come to the United States. And I think the most pressing example of that is COVID. And if you can invest strategically invest in these countries, their health systems able to fight these diseases, perfect global health emergencies before they happen or spread beyond too many countries, then the world would be in a better spot. And then the second thing is, if we're like, Supervisor James Walkinshaw said, the United States is moving more towards isolationism. If the United States withdraws from foreign assistance programs, someone else is going to take our place. That's just how the world works. It's all strategy. You kind of already see this in West Africa, with Russia already gaining a sizable influence there, with China as well. I mean, you saw just recently there were protesters in Mali waving Russian flags. That used to be a fairly Western-aligned country, and now they're moving more towards Vladimir Putin. So yeah, retreating from foreign aid would just, in my view, weaken overall American leadership and make responding to future crises much more difficult for whoever the president is down the line.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of like a common sense things that I think we need to recognize. It's just like, if we want to be a global leader or a global power, and I think overwhelmingly Americans do, because we do say we're the greatest country on earth, and we take pride in the things we try and take pride in things that we do and our own success, and like part of that is engagement with the international community, and foreign aid is just an excellent way of doing that, because it facilitates business, it facilitates trade, it facilitates commerce, and it facilitates humanitarian development. And I just want to give the same question to Mao before we move on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what James mentioned. I think right now we're also at I would say, flipping point, where I do see that there are people like wondering, should the United States be a little bit more isolated, focus on domestic economic, and be strong and negotiate with other country in a very strong position, or should we keep like the global footprint and just keep engaging? I do see that keep engaging is the best way to make most of the legacy we have. We have spent a lot of resources on the foreign aid program. It has given us a lot of great levers and also the advantages in promoting American value. Finding a smart way to continue it. I think previously I heard some panelists mention about there's some reform could be done, or maybe elevation. I think that could be very helpful to keep the program keep going and to make it more impactful.
Yeah, and just before I say goodbye, I just want to just touch on, because think about the national security thing. I think that where it always comes back to when we think about like international aid and national security is where these programs came from. Not just the Cold War, which was a crucial part of that great power competition with the Soviet Union, and also to facilitate these newly independent countries that were former colonies and needed these assistance programs, but also like during the course of the Second World War, before the Second World War, we became more insular. We became less involved with people's affairs. We became more willing to pretend that we could, be protected behind our two oceans. And there were real consequences from that. And one of the lessons that we took away from, this war that cost, 400,000 American lives was that, this does come back to you. German, U-boats in that case comes to the U.S. shores, and you can't just pretend like these things will stop at borders, just like with COVID. And the continuing that legacy and that responsibility, I think, is really crucial. And that's one of the great things about being with the Alliance is seeing people who are young like us and from all around the world invested in the U.S. like us, trying to keep on that legacy of foreign aid, that legacy of responsibility, that legacy of leadership.
Of course.
Of course. All right. Yeah, it was great having you guys on. I think we have another guest.
Thanks for having me, Isaac. I enjoyed
Yeah,
this.
it's great having you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you again too, Vince. Cheers. All righty. And I'm glad that James was able to bring up Africa, because we have one presentation we want to wrap up with. I know it's been a long night, but I think we're having a good conversation going, and I just want to wrap up the presentation on the value of foreign aid and the long-term commitment to that, specifically looking at one of our specialists who deals in Africa, which is one of these key areas where foreign aid can make a huge difference. And if the U.S. does decide that we're not going to continually invest in these countries and these partners and these relationships, China will be filling the void with more than $50 billion of foreign aid. And regardless if you think the consequences of U.S. foreign aid is worth investing in, you have to recognize that other people are going to be filling those gaps. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. I'm glad we were able to get you on. It's been a wild night. We've had the people dealing with floods in Texas and just the weather all over. But
Oh no,
it's great
you're fine. Thank you.
it's great to have you on. Would you just give people a little bit of brief introduction, because I know we gave you a little bit of introduction before you came on. Will you just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get to this presentation?
Hi everyone, my name is Boubacar Balde. I'm a student at Purdue University, West Lafayette, where I'm majoring in political science and law and society. And my political science major focus especially in international relations. And I'm also the outreach director for Alliance for American Leadership.
Yeah, it's a great to see, like, these important positions, having young people just involved in those conversations, young people from all over. So why don't we cut to the chase and get onto this presentation? If you that's something we can do. I mean, I can give you the privileges to controls to screen share.
Sure.
If COVID, we talked about the consequences of COVID, but like we've all become much more experienced in dealing with Zoom because of COVID, which is,
Okay.
if you just click the present,
Can you see?
yeah, we can see. You just want to click the present thing, you should be good.
Hmm.
It's up there next to the pen. So it's editing. Left of that. Left of that. Left, yeah. That works from the beginning. If you go to slideshow, go to slide, yeah, from the beginning. It's right there. Alrighty. Sorry about that, but why don't you just take it away, and I'll sit back and let the expert take it on.
So today I'm going to talk about why U.S. foreign assistance matter in Africa, the role of U.S. aid.
All right.
Oh, yeah. So first, to tell you more about myself, I'm from Guinea in West Africa, and I was born and raised in Africa. So I moved in the United States in 2019. So uh, I saw a very good importance in foreign assistance. So to define foreign assistance is when one country has a lot of like potential and technical expertise on one issue that the other country does not have. So they help promote economic and social development, advanced strategies and partnerships, and they also help improve the living condition of that countries and its populations, and while responding to humanitarian crisis. So what is USAID? USAID was founded in 1961, which stands for United States Agency for International Development. It is a U.S. Government agency responsible for civil aid and development assistance. So it is an independent organization which is under the U.S. Department of State. The organization provides humanitarian aid while responding to humanitarian crises. Like, for example, when they go to Africa, they help on humanitarian crises that happen over there, like in poor countries like Somalia, Kenya, and Nigeria, and many other countries, like while fighting poverty and improving the economic development. They promote the governance, and also help on, because some communities over there, they don't feel safe, so they help improve their stabilities. So there are many keys area where USAID has made a very impactful in Africa. For example, when we take agricultural development, they help farmers improve on their way of farmings, like giving them more things to put on their farms, and making sure that the farms, they can have like more foods. It's more about helping them how to improve their farmings while staying independent by themselves. But also they help on educations, improving, like making sure that young peoples in Africa is aware in educations. They know more, they know more the importance of educations. While also USAID help on health diseases like HIV and malaria. So HIV is a very big thing in African countries, because it is a sexual reproduction disease that happen when two peoples connect. So it is a very in countries like Nigeria, it's a very common that's happened there. And they also help on infrastructure road, like improving the road constructions. Like in Africa, you will see a lot of like motorcycles on the road, because the cars cannot take the road very often because we don't have good roads. But also we have water scarcities in the villages. We have lack of waters, and USAID is there to help, to help improve the situation of those communities. So right here we have Samrat Power, who announced a bill that was given for Africa. She said that 1.2 billion in new money for Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya was spoken Friday on how the money will be dedicated to meeting food crisis in Kenya. So what does this mean? That they give this bunch of money to those African countries, but especially responding to crisis in Kenya, because there is like a lot of people, lot of communities over there, like they have lack of food, they don't eat well, or they have like maybe the food, but they don't know how to eat the food well, and it's also caused them like to have malnutrition. So it's something that USAID, when they send off foreign people to go there and work, so that's part of their job, to help them learn how to eat, how to take care of themselves, and how to do their hygiene. So it really helped reduce poverty, but also help in the vulnerable regions by advancing this impactful. What they do is that it's help advance partnership in the United States, and also in African governments. So right here we have like some challenges and criticism that the USAID has faced, especially during the Trump administrations, because Trump think there was like some frauds in this organization, so he cut it down and he freeze, and a lot of people like Americans lost their jobs and they were sent home. And so one big impact on this in this thing is that a lot of African countries rely on this organization, which is a really big impact on us, because a lot of people will die. And I was watching some videos on YouTube that many women who had HIV went to the clinic, and they rely on those medicines. So they cannot buy the medicine by themselves because it's expensive, but also it's not available in other clinics. So the clinic that has the HIV medicine is closing, and I think a lot of African population will die from this. But another thing is that Trump said that he's lacking down these organizations because he want to partnership with Africa on their to build partnership with them on their resource minerals, so to help them more like be independent. But that's in the Republicans' view, but other Democrats see this like they see it's no, it's different because he has closed an organization that was helping vulnerable people. So it's really something. There is like two things is going on there because we can see why Congress did not say anything about this. So it's a really a big trouble. We can see a central government going on with the executive power from the Trump administrations. So it is a really big thing that is going on right now, and the question that African's continent doesn't know when when this aid will come back and how they can stand on themselves while while the aid is not there. But Alliance for American Leadership is an organization that is helping or working to restore U.S. aid while recognizing that foreign aid is a powerful tool in diplomacy and global corporations. So to give you a good conclusions, like a lot of African leaders are saying that what U.S. aid was there, like they saying that, oh, U.S. aid was there, they had helped us, but however, we don't feel that there was enough help on this. And we think that they was using us by using some research and doing some research on people's, like taking their blood. So they don't think it has been a lot of help. But as well, I personally think it's been really helpful because there have been a little bit of improvement in other areas in countries in Africa. So to give a good conclusion in all this, I believe that USAID has been very successful because it is one of the large humanitarian organizations, and it's built not only democratic governance but it's advanced global interests. So it's helped strengthen the partnership relationship and foster long cooperation between nations. That was it.
Yeah. That I found very interesting is, I mean, this was not planned. We've touched on so much of the stuff we've been talking about throughout this entire stream. And I also really liked it when you mentioned just like, I saw this where there was just not going to be the health access, which I think is something that's what's really going to happen with these cuts, and that's something that I don't think like that people want in the US. Like, we have our frustrations with where government money is spent. We have our concerns about where foreign aid is going. But at the end of the day, there's a continual promise that people want to be up to contribute to the world through these programs. And there's always been a large amount of support for that. And I think that's one of the crucial things that we're trying to get across in the Alliance for American Leadership, which is this is a real issue. And, people joke oftentimes that foreign policy is not a significant interest to the American people. But if you can iterate that, lives are at stake, that, this matters to people around the world, that this produces prosperity for America, and that there are consequences when these things don't go through, you can get people involved. And it's not just, anyone. There are people who have very real connections and very real relationships, like people who came over very recently who have those connections. And like you talked about the foreign aid that will basically no longer be going to Somalia. And we're, I think, the largest donor of aid to the Horn of Africa. And like, I'm from in Minneapolis, there's a very large Somali community. And those people might not be aware of those consequences right now. I'm sure many of them are, but like, providing outlet to focus that an opportunity to express those concerns is just something that we're really focused on, sort of empowering people. And that's one of the great things that foreign aid can do when it's done well. Like you talked about, there's uncertainty about trusting the US, but when you do get in there, you empower your allies, you empower your partners, you are making a safer world, and you're making a safer world for the US. And that's one of the things we talk about. And if I could just ask you one question, just as we're wrapping up, if to put a pin, I guess, on this long stream is, you and other speakers have talked about foreign aid as this continuing long-term commitment and the relevance of reform and all of that. Could you just tell us in your own words, like, why do you think it remains such a constant imperative? Why do you think this isn't going anywhere?
I think it will go like for long term, but because it's not only like helping in like it's not only helping on like improving poverties, but it's also making sure like m- uh making like making sure that we have more like diplomacy around the world, but it's really like a good thing on building partnership. Like Trump now, he's wanting to go over like, okay, I'm gonna cut down all these funding that I'm giving you, but now let's talk about your resource minerals. Like, he want us to be like more maybe independent on getting the resources our own and building our own thing. So, and I also think that's what Africa needs, like it's not all the time relying on foreign countries, because right now our people are dying. So I think it's a really a the good thing about this, it's to help improve like diplomacy, but also build more partnerships. But I think, when for European countries and build partnership with Africa's, like they always benefit for themselves without not looking at the benefit of, like, European do not look the benefit of Africa. So I think when building this partnership, like next time, they need to make sure that, both countries are gaining good benefits. When one country leave, the other one will not lose like anything.
Yeah, I think that's one of the I mean, not just talking about, we talk about foreign aid as a nonpartisan issue, but we also have to think about it as something that just both sides, both the US and other countries, want. And a lot of the things that, like, our more conservative colleagues who rightfully have concerns about fiscal responsibility and want our partners to be more involved in providing for themselves, you know, what they really want is like what you're talking about, which is teaching someone, as we say, teaching someone to fish, not bringing them fish. So, like, there's a lot of, I guess, harmony in those desires. I think is one of the great sources of optimism. The way you said, like, um, when this is coming back, how this can be done differently is that mutual interest. And like the way you brought up, I'm guessing you're referring to the agreement made with the Democratic Republic of the Congo and, I believe, Rwanda. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Where it's like that agreement was made like very between like two very high level communication agreements, and there's still a lot of violence going on, but if the U.S. wants to be involved in like peace, in like making peace, or developing other countries for its own interest, or for those countries' interests, you might want to have something like U.S. aid, keeping those relationships organized, smoothing things over, and building those relationships, because you can try just dropping into countries unannounced and seeing what relationships you can form, but having those connections is just so valuable, and long-term partners.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like, I'm not sure if you also read this thing, Troy Filtre. He's the senior director for the U.S. Department of State. He has also mentioned that, when he resigned the positions, and he's gonna leave this summer the U.S. Department of State, because he said that, Africa had a lot of potentials, that when European countries are building all this partnership, they need also to look up the good side that African countries has, but not only getting their benefits in leaving the country. So that was really something good that he pointed out.
Yeah, and that's something that Nalin talked about, and also Lilith talked about, which is, you could, like, there's the transfer of money. We talk about, like, in Duluth, every dollar we spent getting people over to learn, we gained $11. But there's also like these countries have things that to offer us that are not always as clear to see. Like the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo has vast natural resources, but also like a really phenomenal musical scene. Is often described as being like one of the most beautiful countries on earth, and the idea that we can learn from each other, like in Naline's case, talking about like dealing with diseases on the ground where they start, solving them when they're small, and learning those lessons, or Lilith like exchanging cultural ideas, building relationships, and expanding business community, like business connections and familial connections, and also like a little bit of what you're talking about with just this being an interaction that we're always going to have, and being clear about that and communicating that and continuing that is just really valuable. And I'm just curious, just before we wrap up, because we've been going for a while, and I've been going for a while, and I was curious if you have one thing you want to say, like what is something you want people to take away from this?
I just want to say that USAID is a very, good organizations that I believe that, it should stay. It should stay, but, maybe countries need, and the United States need to find a way to, to still bring or restore the organizations, but also making sure that it's on their own benefits, but also it's the benefit of the country that they are building on
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. All right. It was great. It was great talking to you. It was great to meet you, and to have your presentation there, because it was also great to be able to tie in some of the current events, because this is something current, and as problematic as the cuts to USA have been, this is the kind of attention that the international aid community has wanted for so long, is to get the sort of new eyes and new appreciation. And I think that's one of the things that we're able to do, and just hopefully we'll be able to do more and more. And that's just something with the Alliance for American Leadership we're looking forward to doing.
Absolutely, I agree. All right, have a good night.
All right, cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the lessons that I feel like is thinking about the Alliance for American Leadership, and the process that brought us to where we are today and where we'll be going in the future, is this is a difficult time for foreign aid. I mean, there couldn't be a more important and more difficult time to try and advocate for foreign aid. But I don't know if this is a saying that extends out of Minnesota, but it's very common. It's usually quite difficult to do the right thing at the right time, and I think there's opportunities that we talked about, and there's real difficulties, but the continuity is there, because you see, there was storms in Texas, and the left was willing to come on, and there was bad weather for all across the country. People were still able to arrive at the in-person event, and that resilience is important. That's the key word here, which I think about a lot, which is resilience, in terms of keeping these relationships, having resilient partners, having resilient supply chains, I should say, and just the importance of keeping on, because these are long-term strategic goals, and that we learn these lessons, and hopefully when U.S. foreign aid returns, we'll have learned many lessons, and certainly it will be harder, because we've given up a lot of the advantages that we spent decades acquiring, and that we only got because of the sacrifice that came from the First and Second World Wars. But it's worth doing, and that's the end of the day. And as an organization, that's one of the overriding, I guess, wonders of working for the Alliance for American Leadership. And one of the reasons why I would encourage people to get involved, and if you're not personally interested in being involved, to invite your friends or family to donate or to take part, because this isn't just about individual politicians. It's not even just about countries receiving aid. It's about getting people's voices heard, making sure they're represented, making sure people are accountable to the people who sacrificed for our ability to engage, and for keeping the world safe. And I think that's something you see with all the people involved in the Alliance for American Leadership, is a sense of responsibility, and that's a really incredible thing for to happen at any point in time. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to thank everyone for staying on and for listening to these conversations and for being resilient through some of the difficulties that occurred. But follow us on our social media. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on YouTube or Instagram, because we're going to be here for a long time, because we have important work to do that's going to continue for a long time. And we'd love if you were a part of that. All right, good night, everyone.